Don't be scared, you can come closer. Plenty of seats. I was a bit taken aback by these new trees that we have that I hadn't seen before, these little white things. Very interesting. Try to decor. All right, well, welcome everyone. As I said, my name is Andy Smith. I work here in a mortgage. So any financial questions, please hit me up afterwards. And then we have two guests here. So first, this is Tom Shallcross. Okay. With Now Serving. So he is also the co-host of Serving Chicago, which many of you know the podcast there. So he's done about 30 million in flips and currently owns 100 units. Goals right there, hashtag. And then we also have Andrew Zehnder. So Andrew has extensive living experience. He's going to tell a good story today. So I'll let you guys take a couple and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, Andy mentioned Tom Shallcross. I focus almost predominantly on the north and northwest side of the city. I've been doing that for probably the past 5 or 6 years. We are geographically focused, not so much asset class focused. So we will do extensive rehab on anything from a condo to call it a 12-unit building. So even though we're talking about flipping today, I know a lot of you are more buy and hold investors. A lot of that rehab strategy holds true regardless if you're flipping a bungalow or taking down a 40.
Thanks, Tom. So my name is Andrew. My experience is not as extensive as Tom's. I'm typically work a W-2 job, so this is not my profession. John, as you guys probably know, asked me to come on here. John and I are good friends. He knows this story intimately. And asked if I would come and share it. And at first I was like, no effing way, right? Because it's a little embarrassing, right? It's a big L. But I think if I can at least help somebody in this room avoid a similar situation, then it'll definitely be worth it. So with that, I'll kind of just get into it.
Yeah, we're going to dig into the story. Oh, I'm calling it flip gone wrong. Hashtag. I'm all about my hashtags.
It's valid. All right, so I think I'm going to try to condense it to boil it down in the interest of time, and so that this doesn't kind of devolve into a therapy session. But I think there's two main ingredients for this recipe of disaster. The first one would be overconfidence. So at this point, this all happened a couple of years ago. At this point, I had maybe 10 or so flips under my belt, and they'd all gone pretty well. Does anybody in this room have around that number, never lost any money? Okay. So have you ever thought to yourself, man, this shit's easy? No. Okay. I guess I'm the only one. All right. So there's a little bit of overconfidence in there, and overconfidence in my abilities to identify red flags, as well as overconfidence, I think, in the legal system to, I had this misconception that there was this safety net, right, in the legal system, and that as long as I had my documentation, my ducks in a row, that, I'd at least almost be made whole again. But that's not the case, as I'll get into in a couple minutes. So there's that, and of course, there's a little bit of naivete in this recipe. So I don't even know if I said that word right. But that's about it. So with the overconfidence, right? I think that one of the main issues is it became hard, or it was hard, for me to discern the difference between a yellow flag and a red flag. All right, so I'll set the stage. I met this general contractor through a Facebook group. He made a post talking about he was working on a project and needed an investor. So I reached out, tried to do as much due diligence as possible. Went to the project site, looked at the financials. But at that point, the project was like midway done. He just needed a little additional funds to, cross the finish line. At that point, he wasn't willing to join an LLC together. So at that point, I required that I would be first position on a loan, and I'd have a note and everything which he refused because there was already somebody in first position that he couldn't do. So I ended up not going in on that deal. Also, the numbers didn't really make sense. They didn't pencil out for me for the returns that he was promising. So yeah, when we canceled our whatever operation we were planning, and we parted ways. Simple as that. A couple months later, he reached out to me again. At this point, that previous project had sold, and the numbers actually would have worked out. So that kind of gave me a little bit of reassurance that, like, oh, maybe he does know what he's doing. His numbers did work. So there's that. He reached out to me for a new project, an extensive project. It was a single story in Portage Park that he was adding an additional level to. So really extensive project. I'm going through the financials, everything looks right. He says, of course, you'll have first position on this loan. So everything looks good. I reach out to, now, Tom, do you see any red flags at this point?
No, keep going.
Okay. Cool. So I reached out to my attorney. My
And
attorney,
be at Portage Park on that.
it was good. It was a good project. So I reached out to my attorney. My attorney drafts up a note, the mortgage, sends it over to the closing company or the title company. And at that point, I asked my attorney if it's okay for me to send funds. He said, yeah, everything's good. So here's where the red flag happened. The first red flag. Arguably the first red flag. So I had to wire funds directly to him because he needed money for closing, right? He needed a certain amount of money for closing. So I assumed that because my mortgage was already at the title company, I had a signed note that, and I asked my attorney, like, is it okay if I send funds? And he said, yes, that it was fine. So I wired funds to this gentleman's LLC. It was a probate sale, so closing took a little bit longer than expected, as is usual for those types of deals. And when it finally closed, my attorney reached out to me and he said he never got paid, which, his portion was supposed to come out at the closing table and be sent to him immediately. So I reached out to the title company and find out that my name is not on this mortgage. There's another person in first position or another entity. I asked who it was. They gave me the information. It was a well-known construction finance company that many of you probably work with. And yeah, my documents weren't even brought to the closing table. So at this point, I'm freaking out. And I pretty much resigned to opening up a lawsuit, reach out to the contractor. He plays dumb. He said, oh, I didn't know that would happen, but I don't know. So he was just completely lying at that point, and I knew that I was, in deep shit. So file a lawsuit. Lawsuits take a long time. The project was only supposed to be about a year. It started in November of 2020. And as of June or July of 2022, there's a stop work order on it because he didn't get permits. So between then and now, a whole bunch of stuff happened that I'm not going to go into because it would take me way too long. But finally, after about a year from the time that I started my lawsuit, I received a judgment from the court, and I was able to put a lien on the property. So, but I'm still behind the first position. And it doesn't look like the project is progressing at all. No developments have been made for like the past 6 months at that point. Construction stalled. The contractor won't respond to any calls. It's, done. So eventually the first position lender files for foreclosure. And at this point, it doesn't look like I'm going to get any of my capital back because I have no idea if the contractor ever got the permits, but the the addition is already built. It's almost done. The only thing that needs to be done is drywall and finishing at this point. So if he didn't get permits for that, there's gonna be a lot of work that has to be done before they can sell that, before they'll be able to sell it. And they likely won't even make their money on it, which means I'm not gonna make any money or even to see my principal. So and I have little to no recourse after that. I imagine that the contractor is gonna file for bankruptcy. And yeah, that's 6 figures. That's just wiped off my net worth, which is a lot for me. Like I said, I don't do this professionally. This was a side hustle, and it was a substantial portion. So don't be like me. If you see yellow flags, they're potentially red flags. If partnerships can go south really quickly. I'm almost forgetting the best part. Once I filed my lawsuit, let me step back. In the beginning, before we even went in on the deal, I did my due diligence, did a background check, looked it through the county court records, nothing on this guy. By the time that I filed my lawsuit, there were 4 lawsuits, all for over 100K. And I was somebody contacted me through Instagram, saying that they had a group of 4 other people that were preparing to proceed with legal action against this gentleman. So now there's, roughly 10 lawsuits. Yeah, and it's a disaster, pretty much.
Were those all for the same project?
No, so this guy was actually getting investors to come in on projects that he didn't even own. So he was a general contractor. He was working on somebody else's project. He would then reach out to a potential investor and say, hey, crazy. I recently found out that he was arrested for forgery, like 6 or 7 months ago. And none of the stuff was, visible when I went in on the deal, right? So it can go south before you even see the red flags. That's a tough thing.
And the good news is I am ever the optimist. And there's that amazing song, The Only Way Is Up, right? So thank you for sharing your experience, because it's terrified all of us. And Tom, maybe you could talk a little bit about Andrew's project, and obviously know what the red flags were, but maybe about his project and avoiding some of those mishaps, and kind of with your experience level, and how you would have done things differently.
Sure. I mean, that sucks.
Yeah.
That not awesome. It's a good color commentary, Webby. You always will be wiring money into a title company. That's like the number one thing. If you take anything out of this story, even when, not to get too in the weeds, I'll do promissory notes with friends and family who want to invest with me. And even that, I'll do it above board to a title company, even though it's going to cost each another $75 in wire or whatever it is, just so everyone is aware. If I get hit by a train or whatever, the money is there. A third party should always be handling those situations, because that can happen very quickly. Think about it, just to kind of piggyback off the story. If you ever get asked to invest in something, if you don't have an operating agreement, like in this case, this guy went with an LLC, you don't know how many liens there are. You don't know what position you are in. If everyone follows that logic here. If I'm gonna go do a flip and I'm like, hey, you want 50 grand, Chris, you want $50,000 coming on this? I can make that deal to everyone in this room, and you'd have no idea the 32nd on the list, right? And then I have no intention of paying 31 out of 32 people back, right? So I mean, that would be probably the biggest takeaway on this. Vetting, and then just taking a step back, vetting contractors, it's tough. It's just, you can do all the due diligence in the world. You can pull past permits, you can talk to them, you can meet at the job site. The reality of the situation is, even guys who are good guys, they can get into trouble. When they get into trouble, they do whatever they can, right? You become a byproduct of the situation. A lot of these guys live hand to mouth, and one thing goes bad, and all of a sudden it's your project or your personal funds that take the hit there. So you can do all the due diligence you want on the front end. You need to understand and live with the risk that, hey, this can still go wrong for me. What are other ways that I can protect myself? That'd be my commentary on.
Very well, right, yeah.
And then Tom, do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about some of the things we should do? So you've already mentioned wiring funds to top company. What are some of the other kind of top tips, I guess, for flipping?
Okay, so it's a lot of so the top
Yeah.
five. So I like when John asked me, I think there's three things that people miss. These might not be the three things you need to do to be successful in a flip, but like from conversation with people, these are three things that are overlooked or missed. And I can talk through each one of them for about 2 minutes, but it's the amount of liquidity you actually need to get the project done. It's understanding the numbers, which is very simple, but I'd like to go through that and talk about all the soft costs and all your holding costs. And then at the back end is the user experience for that end buyer. And when I say user experience, I'll give an example. If you have a bungalow that, let's say, it's a 4-bed, 2-bath, but it's, 1 bedroom upstairs and a crappy attic. It's 2 bedrooms jammed into that main level. So your kitchen's a tiny little shopping kitchen, and it's crappy little bedroom in the basement. That is completely different than this project like you're supposed to do, where you pop the top and you get beautiful 3-bed, 2-bath upstairs. You open up the main level. They're both 4.2s. One of them's worth, 150 grand more than the other, right? So too many times we get caught in that spreadsheet of, oh, this is a comp, this is a comp, this is a comp. What is that end experience for the user, right? You can't create, if you want to sell something at an 800K price point, you can't have a 2x10 closet primary. It doesn't matter if everything else is right, the house will not sell, right? There's all these things that you need to consider on the back end of that. And I use the term user experience, I can't think of a better phrase for it, but we go through that checklist every single time. If you were the end buyer, what would you like about this house? There's some things you can't control, but there's a lot of things that you can control. And for a few grand, you take care of it and the thing doesn't sit. And we all got spoiled the last 2 years. I just said that house wouldn't sell, anything sold actually. You can be an idiot, like it doesn't matter. We're getting back to a point though, where you actually need to care about these things. And that's what you see it all the time. We go look at a comp like, oh, this guy cost himself 40 already. Could have fixed it with 1,500 bucks. So I think that's like probably like when I say user experience, that's the term I mean. Let's go back to, I'll just keep rambling here unless there's questions on it.
We can also do questions at the end if you want to. You take it.
Sure, I'll land the plane. Tell me if I'm. All right, so let's talk about actually understanding the numbers and holding costs. The first 2 points I made, because they're intertwined here. All right, so let's talk about holding costs. Let's say you buy something in liquidity. Let's say you buy something for, I'm trying to give a real example here. You buy something for 400K. You put 150 into it. You're into this thing for 550. You're going to sell for 775 on the back. There's a recent deal I had, which is why these numbers are bad. You're all in hard cost 550, selling for 775. How much money do you think you need liquidity wise to make that deal happen?
Like renovation and purchase.
Correct. So yes, good starting point here. So 20, you're gonna get a loan on that 550. Most lenders, depending on your experience, but let's just use it. It's probably a very standard number. Will give you 80% of 550, right? So you're gonna need 20% of 550. So that's 55K is 10, so that's 110, right? You need 110 on the day of closing. That's your down payment that you're gonna have. Okay. What else are you going to need though?
Points on the loan, if any, out of pocket. And then you're gonna need reserves, for the loan during the construction process. And then you're essentially gonna need, your startup construction money, because the banks reimburse, they don't give you anything upfront, so if you have to get the job started, you have to put a reasonable amount of money down with, the construction materials, so not necessarily saying you pay the labor, but they gotta get started somehow.
Correct. So let's go back to this example. We said it's 20%, about 110K down. You're gonna have fees, you're gonna have points, you're gonna pay the title company. That 110 becomes 120. Like that's what you end up bringing to closing. All right. So now you own the property, you're into this thing for 120K, liquidity off the table. Mike was saying in cages, we'll really break this down for a second. Draw process is you get paid after the work is done. your renewables of the world, whoever you're using, they're gonna do a draw and they're gonna pay you, they're gonna come do an inspection, great, the work is done. And maybe you can hold off on paying your laborers, you have a good agreement with them, pay after the draw will pay you. But you still gotta buy materials. If you're doing a kitchen, you're still buying stone appliances, cabinets, like 25 grand right there, you have to pay for that before you get reimbursed. You also need to cover the holding costs. In this example, your holding costs are probably about 5 grand a month. That loan we just said, that loan is probably about 3,500 bucks, somewhere in that range, plus taxes, insurance, maintenance of the grass. If this project's a year, well, what's 5 grand times a year? 60 grand, right? So you're gonna pay 60 grand as well. So we're at like 110, 120. We're at 60 just to cover your holding costs. So you're in this thing now about 180-ish. That's without fronting anything or paying for anything. Right? You have to, as Mike said, even if you can kind of slow play or agree with your laborers, hey, you guys can pay on the draw, you still got to get all the materials. You still need X amount of capital to run the project. So we're at 180 plus the starting the capital, let's call that another 20 to 30. You're about 200. Now, what happens when that rehab becomes 150 and that rehab becomes 180? Where does that come from? Comes from you. It's another 30. So the reality, this isn't to scare anyone, but the reality is if you're going to get yourself into this situation, you need 2.25, you need 2, like whatever you're comfortable with, but you need liquidity, whether that's with partners, whether that's home capital, whatever it is, you need those funds to get this project done. And I think that's one of the most overmissed pieces of the equation is people don't go find that 220. They start, they're halfway done, and they make decisions they shouldn't make because they are backed into a corner on the front end. You're gonna say something.
Taxes, insurance, lawn care, shoveling, all the stuff adds up,
Yeah, and then what happens is when you get pinched in a situation, the project goes longer. What happens with holding costs? That 60 becomes 70 and 80. That's where people get buried. It starts compounding on. So understanding, not just understanding your numbers, like, hey, we're all in for 550, 775. We're going to be okay here. I understand numbers, but then understanding that what actual powder that is needed to get a job done. And again, that's not to scare anyone. It's so that you go and find it beforehand and partner or do whatever you got to do so that you can actually complete the project the way you need to complete it. Tying into that, let's talk about those actual numbers. So let's say we're gonna bang on this example here. You're at 550, you're gonna sell for 775. How much money do you think you will make at the end of the day after paying everything? Like, what do you think is the actual money in your bank when all is said and done? Yeah, it's like 65. So if everyone's here is doing 775 minus 550, Tom, that's 225. Where does the money go? Let's break it down a little bit. We actually, if anyone wants, I built my own calculator on this. I wrote a blog on how you can build your own, just so you can do this in your own way, but at a very high level. So 775, Mike's got the calculator out. Let's figure this out, everybody. All right, so 775, you're paying 5% on commission right there, right? So that's like 40K, somewhere around 38, 40K, somewhere in that range, 40K out the door. Your permits are about 10, right? You're gonna get drawings, it's about 7, you're gonna pay the city, you're gonna pay everything else. So we're at 40, we're at 10. Something at that level needs to be staged, another 4. So we're at 40, 10, 14, we're at 55 out the door. Closing costs on both ends of the deal when you buy and when you sell. So call it another 15 and 20 right there. You're out about 70K. Still looking good. You're at 700 out of the 550. What else did we talk about? We had holding costs, right? Your holding costs another 75. Knock that off the bottom. All of a sudden, what actually hits your bank account is going to be somewhere around like 80,000, as mentioned, and then you're going to pay 40% taxes on it. Right? You're going to walk away 50, 60K, like somewhere in that range on a deal when it says 550 to 775. Again, that's not to deter you, but that's to stop you from doing a deal. I'm all in for 550. It's going to appraise out at 615. I'm going to sell at 615. Appraise out on a hold you can hold forever. Time's grass. But if you're going to flip and sell that at 615, you will not make money. Or if it will not be worth the time, effort, and risk that you're putting into it. You try to squeeze out 10 grand, whatever it is. Like your spreads need to be big enough and large enough where they're accounting for all the, for lack of better words, garbage that goes into flipping. And these are just like costs. I'm not talking about the time away from family. I'm not talking about contractors potentially stealing from you, dealing with the neighbors. There's also the soft costs and the intangibles of just the BS that goes into this job, dealing with the city, like, it sucks. Like, there's almost another cost you need to put, however you want to weigh that goes into this. So again, these are not meant to be stopping you from doing this, but we pick up projects where people F up. And this is where we pick up projects. People didn't come in with the right liquidity, they didn't come in with the right numbers. And that's the points I'm trying to just drill home here in my brain.
Thank you. That was a lot. So I think, Andrew, anything you want to add to the points there? Cool. Well, I'm sure a ton of our audience have got questions. Should we take some questions on major stuff there? Sound good? I'm gonna run around with the microphone and then hopefully the people at home can hear as well. So I'll be back. Okay, go on this one. Okay. Yes, thanks. So we've looked on there. Did the attorney who gave you approval to send the funds have any skin in this? Was there any recourse there?
No. I mean, I should have been more clear with, can I send the funds directly to the contractor, right? And it just worked. So I just didn't know what I didn't know. So no, he was actually pretty cold about the whole situation. He was just like, give me my money, and didn't offer any advice or anything like that. Pretty rough.
And you were making the purchase as an LLC, not as an individual?
That's not correct. No, it was coming from my own personal LLC, yes. But the funds were wired from my personal LLC to his LLC. So we didn't have a JV agreement at all.
The reason I'm saying is you were making the purchase as an individual versus an LLC. If you're doing it as an individual, sometimes you have some coverage in your homeowner's policy that gives you some fraud reimbursement coverage. They had this to do. So that fraud reimbursement can, not make you whole, but it'll give you back 25,000, 30,000.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time though.
Cool.
Check, look at that.
Yeah, I'm also want to kind of throw that lawyer hustle the way you can see, apparently that's you. I'm just kind of confused, if you're going to this, what exactly review did he do? If your name's on the documents that closing, what is your lawyer, what is he doing?
He drew up the note and sent the mortgage over. That's pretty much it. So I don't know if, I just don't know enough about those processes to know if he didn't do something he was supposed to, or if there is like any sort of malpractice involved.
And I never worked in with like a limited partner, so this kind of an added level of complexity. Was that probably the first time you did that as well?
Yes, it was, because every other joint venture I'd done previously, we, it was under a series LLC, and so we all had our own ownership in that, so.
So this other guy was I was a little confused at the word, so this other guy was the lead on the project, and he propositioned you to come in and provide some funds. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Tom, I feel like you're gonna answer me to that.
So one thing, like with your attorneys, so Illinois is like the most goofed up state here, and I'm starting to learn more and more every time I do a job, but the attorney needs to be lockstep with the actual title company, right? So if you're closing a Chicago title, whoever it is, your attorney and your lender are all providing all the paperwork to the title company. So I can see like saying this all out loud, title company had Renov's paperwork. They never had this paperwork, or even if it did, it was lost on a shuffle. And then that's how this slid under the cracks. Even though the attorney had it, the title, if it's not a title, there's nothing, it doesn't exist.
Exactly, yeah.
What's my next question?
Hi. About the user experience, I know kind of like a list of people through each job. Can you tell me a little more about that? Do you have any resources we can like concentrate about to learn more about that user experience to increase possible revenue?
Yeah, so here's a good example, like, we started doing more high-end flips, like, I spent 2 hours yesterday. Flora Blahnik or, Luke Blahnik and Anthony Flora, they're realtors we use in Logan Square. We're in their office, we're deconverting Greystone. We spent 2 hours yesterday going through the plans that our architect presented. So this is like, where are we putting windows? This is this primary feel grandiose? Looking at the comps, like, do we need the vault ceilings? You know, do we need a skylight here? Is this walk-in closet big enough for someone to write this check that we want them to write? Like, is this husband and wife gonna walk in and say, yes, this is it? Right? Where have we gotten burned before? Like, the family room's not big enough. Okay, well, how do we make it bigger with the space we have? So there's not like this like boom, 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 boom button checklist, but it's taking the house, when you're walking through a house that you're gonna look to renovate. This could be your core unit that you're looking to rent, because it's same thing on a smaller scale with renters. Walking through that and saying, where am I not checking the box, right? If me and my spouse were moving in here, what would I not like about this property? Like, where am I missing the mark? And things like finishes, they can tear those out, but like, if you provide too small of a private, or if you put them and the kids on different floors, or you just don't provide enough, if the island's too close to the fridge, they open the stove, you can't open the fridge at the same time. It's all those little things that nobody talks about that are never really in it. And the reason we know this is before COVID, like during COVID, you could sell a house rent. Before that, we would do these massive, awesome flips. And then we wouldn't sell, or we'd have to price drop because of that, right? Our island would be too close to the fridge. It's like, they didn't cost me anything, right? I could have just, all the money we spent and we cost ourselves a 25K price drop as this. Like, that's stupid. So we made enough of those stupid mistakes where I feel like we have started to learn from those and not make them again.
Tom, I just want to pick up as well on what you said there, starting with the end goal, right? You're starting with the business going to be selling it at the end, and they know what they're going to want to be, it's showing properly, they're going to want to find out for the quick features, the part that are above the stove, all of this thing. So it's something I just picked up. Keep on. Any other question?
More from the perspective of, as you're starting to do the research for with, trying to mitigate some of those costs on the front end, but also just from the perspective of investing in the right things. So, any 2 or 3 best practices that you try to use when you're doing comps or flips, whether it's going to Redfin or going to, how you price out materials that are the best in this neighborhood, this market, or just anything around that area where you're thinking about trying to protect those margins, but also kind of fit what your clientele is expecting to see.
It's a really good question, and there's not a great answer. It comes with more experience. That's why, side note, that's why I focus in specific neighborhoods, where I can look at a block and know the block, as opposed to like someone offers me something in Bridgeport, like it might be a great deal. I don't know Bridgeport. Like, so I'm gonna shy away from that because I don't have it as good as a grasp as I would have. Even though I'm licensed, I'm an agent, I help other people. I will still go. I just mentioned I work with Luke. Like, I still work with a lot of realtors. They specialize in deconverting Greystones in Logan Square. I will pay them a commission. That's my safety net, that they're gonna be my consultant and be with me on the ride. Two sides of that sword, though. You can't just go to an agent who's like, oh yeah, this will sell for whatever. Like, they're highly incentivized to do that. Be careful. But I lean on experts to say, hey, am I wrong? Right. Then the other thing I would do is when you go on a Redfin, or you're going wherever you go to pull these comps, grab a realtor, go off the actual MLS. When you're doing that, what would your house have that this one would not have, or vice versa, right? And then try to quantify it. You're never going to have an apples to apples comparison. So where am I getting burned here that they might not have? So it's kind of a simplistic answer, but it's reps, just doing it over and over.
I have a question about, you were talking about net profits on, what they fix and flip. My first 10 years, so I'm just getting real estate, I'm an agent as well. And also, I got into fix and flip, because more than one, how you just said, 550 to 775, something huge spread, but even until the cost, I've never heard of it. But I was agent, I was doing this, how reasonable is for me to expect to waive over commission costs? Because it's common for us to be like, budgeting for that.
is it common for fix and flippers to say, okay, you know what, on my way to, well, I have someone in the field to decrease those costs? And the second question is, the taxes you mentioned, I think it's 40%, also not this question, but where's the 40%?
So the ladder is Uncle Sam, right? And you get the short-term capital gains on your flips. You get hammered. They saw it. Real estate is very good for your taxes, except for flipping. It's the worst. It's like trading stocks. It's terrible. But to your earlier part of the question, yes, people do that all the time. Even I've done that in some of my deals. At the end of the day, you're still trading your time. My time is worth that amount of money. So if I have to give up my commission to make the deal work, that's not a good deal. That's Saturday away from the family. That's dealing with the BS. Like, if that's what you need to make this thing pencil, no, that's like the cherry on top. You want to keep an extra 20 grand, 15 grand in your pocket, great. But you should not put all this work and effort and then put all the work and effort on the agent side just to get it done. So it's a nice to have, but it should not be the reason. Doing a flip as like your loss leader to save the commission is not a good strategy. I guess is what I put. It's a nice to have.
Do you have a biggest mess up or biggest learning if you don't have a biggest mess up?
Oh, we got it. I say, all right, so all right. I think the biggest ones we have messed up have been overconfidence in what we get a rehab done for. Right, and then it hurts you on the back end, and then it hurts the holding costs. So thinking, when we started going big and thinking, hey, we can get this done for 450K, and that 450 becomes 600, and then you add another 5 months to the timeline, that hurts. That's not awesome. Right, so every step of the way, we started on the south side. First property I bought for $24,000. Right, like we started doing that and doing little flips and like, okay, let's come to the north side, let's do bungalows. Okay, let's do a couple small multis. And now we're doing things in the luxury area. Every step of the way that we grew, though, we messed up the rehab process, I should say. Every time we upped our game, the first time we did it, and then you start pulling it up. So like the last time the first deconversion we did, and we were pretty fortunate that the market kind of had our back on. We were 150K. That's a big number to be over for someone who has 25 flips or whatever under the belt. Like that's a big miss on our. And it wasn't so much we're over as we misinterpreted what was needed, going back to the user experience, what was actually needed on the back. And we start talking, and it's like, oh shit, we need to do this, and this. It adds up in a hurry. So I don't have like the one crazy story here, like Adrian has. But I think every time we scaled up, the first time we did it, like we admittedly like we were wrong.
If I had to ask, I guess, an additional question to that. So you mentioned market a little bit. So I think most of us here know that the market is normalizing at the moment. It's one word that we're using. How is that changing, or for both of you, how is that changing any particular approach to the industry?
It's funny. So we've had stuff that's still sold pre-market, and then we've had stuff that's sitting right now, and it's very everything's stagnant, right? Like it's not a little bit of interest, but it's not you used to put it out there and go boom. So I'm still aggressive. We just closed on a building on Monday. We're still out there. We're still aggressive. I don't want to be caught holding 6 of those properties though. We're flipping stuff at a 1 point whatever price tag in Logan. I can't be holding 6 of those if things really go bad. You can't rent this. There's no end game there except to sit there and hold. So on those luxury ones that we got very excited about, we did a lot about, we're doing it. That's 1 or 2 at a time and cap. And that's at a liquidity standpoint, that's what I'm comfortable with. We're much more focused on rentals right now. Because even if the market tanks, it doesn't matter. Right? Everyone in this room, like time is your biggest asset on a rental. And the rate sucks, whatever. If you make it work with this rate, cool. Roll with it. At some point, you're going to refi. So we are much more, like our marketing is much more towards trying to pick up an 8 unit, a 10 unit, as opposed to making a quick buck. Where when things got crazy, we're the exact opposite. Let's make hay while the sun's out.
Yeah, I'm terrified. So I don't think normalizing is probably the best word for it, but undergone a career change in the past year or so, so I just haven't had even the effort or focus on finding more flips. I used to do, you know, direct mailers and stuff like that to source deals, but with that, when that experience was happening, you know, it took the better part of 2 years. I was hesitant to put any money in because I just wasn't sure where I was going, so I'm probably sitting out of the market for, I don't know, the next 6 months, probably. We'll see.
It really shows anyway, interesting professionals from my experience in the mortgage world are predicting improved rates, and they're never going to be back the way they were 12 months ago, right? We're all realistic about that, but you know, generally the census or the consensus is 6-8 months time, we'll probably see improved rates. So if you have projects that are going to be ready on them, let's figure that out. Other questions?
Twice. And again, all the way up.
All the way up. Okay, I just had a question about timeline, so you know, bought a house that you were gonna flip, it was just automatic rehab, you know, you want to build an addition. Is it realistic to think that you could get it done in 4 months or less than 6 months? Or like, what kind of changes the timeline? Because I heard you say a year, and I know obviously for probably the flips that you're doing that higher price point, that makes sense, but if you were flipping maybe like a $300,000 house, selling it for, I don't know, 475, what's the timeline for like cosmetic?
Sure, so let's say that project, let's say the rehab takes you 90 days, 3 months. In a project that truly is cosmetic, you don't need to go through plans and permit, you still need an easy permit, which is a week or 2 as opposed to 60 days. So that's kind of a divide. The bigger you go, you're now dependent on the city, you're waiting 60 days to even start out. You lose 2 months for nothing. So let's say you don't have to lose those 2 months, you lose a week or whatever. Call it 90 days to get it done, you're at 3 months. You still gotta list it, right? If you're actually, if you're not holding, if you're gonna flip it. I don't know what you want to give allowance for, because the market's a little goofy right now. Do you give an allowance of 60 days for it to close, 30 days? Depends, whatever number you want to plug in there. But then once, that's to get under contract. Then once under contract, you're at 45 days to close. So yes, you can do a rehab in 3 months. But let's say you give yourself 2 months to get it under contract, and then call it 2 months, probably quicker than 2 months, but call it another 2 to actually have funds into your account. Right, so you're still probably around 7, like front to end there. I think that's realistic. Like the number's never going to be 4 though, unless you sell it right away. They close in 30 days. No matter how well you control the rehab, there's then the back end that you don't have that much control over.
Anyone else?
What do you see as the average price per square foot now? You know, factoring in inflation and material labor that's gone up. What would you say for like a middle of the road house? Not too luxury, not too basic, so something in the middle. Average square foot for, you know, building it out or what have you.
I honestly have we don't do it per square foot. Like we break everything down on line item. So I can look at what we've done and give you a number, but we don't calculate it that way.
One of the things in the insurance world we're finding is that the replacement costs are out of whack a little bit. So I was just trying to get a sense for, you know, what you're seeing in the marketplace as far as, you know, costs being higher than maybe projected like a year ago or even 6 months ago to build something out, new addition or whatever. So
because the last few years have been goofy. We look at the pre-COVID numbers. So when we were doing stuff like even beginning of COVID, like to the 2020-ish type of like time frame, almost everything and it varies. Like things are, some things are like double. But as a general, like if we look at a project from that and said, oh, that costs us 150, we're gonna make that like 200-ish now.
Yeah.
Like that's like the realistic. Like when we look at past projects, that's about what we be at. So that 25%, like that's just like a ballpark high level of what the cost is compared to what it was.
Okay, so 200,000 per square foot roughly.
No, I'm just saying like a 150 rehab is now a 200K rehab.
There you go. Time for one last question, if anyone's got one. Otherwise, I'll have two. Is that right? Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to ask about, so that first, we have you talking about, where you're at, 500 and you got the spread of 700. Is there any way that, you get something like that? Of course, you always want to, get a bigger spread or, try to get a ton of equity in each flip that you got. So I guess my question is, how can we get, maybe bring the 500,000 down to where it's, we increase our spread or something? You're talking about, how you have soft costs in there and, certain things that can come up during the rehab. But, what can we do to, decrease maybe the 500,000 to where it's we can get, more of a bigger spread in the rehab? So we do something, as far as on the construction end, as far as, trying to, eliminate the costs there, or even, trying to get the, purchase price down.
Yeah, I understand. So I never beat up contractors. I'm probably the most lenient. I'm the greatest guy to work with if you're a contractor. Because you do your work, I pay you in pay you on time, and I never bitch about it. Because of stories like this, I don't dig around, for lack of better words. You want your money, here you go, pay you. So I don't really, my construction number is what it is. I never beat those guys up. I could probably be a little more aggressive, do enough volume where I can probably squeeze out a little bit here and there. I don't. The easiest, the smallest hits are, can you get better financing? Can you do it quicker? Like there's little things you can do to tweak it. Can you work with your agent on the back end? The biggest thing though is buying it right. That's where you can make a big dent, is buying the property correctly, right? So if you need to invest in marketing, so you're direct to owner, but that's where you can take something, instead of buying it at 500, you buy it at 440, right? Can you do cash offers? Can you do whatever it is to buy it right? That's where you have the biggest change. All the other changes are a couple grand here or there. And yes, you should do that and optimize the business, but they're not going to move the needle as much as buying it right. That's the big one that you have control over.
So you can take us out.
Yeah. As you were mentioning, Tom, scaling up from like the south side up to the luxury rentals, I was just wondering, would you ever go back to like mid-range flips, or are you like pretty much on the luxury?
I love mid-range flips. If I can flip one of those in Portage Park all day long, that's like my. The problem is that end buyers started buying them during COVID, right? And then also that it's less competition, or there's more competition. More people can do a 100K rehab than can do a 500K. So the amount of the way to enter that game is much simpler, and there's a lot more people crowding around. So it's a tougher competition. The other thing, going back to the intangibles, and this is more of a personal decision for me, because I'm someone who has 4 kids, like I'd rather do like 4 projects a year than do 20. Right? Like I'm dealing with the city just 20 times versus 4 times. Like, there's a lot that goes into, yes, you're putting your eggs in one basket, there's risk, and there's a lot of bad there. But the good is it's a simpler life. It's an easier, simpler way to do it. So it fits me nicely. But I love the idea of the mid flips. Like those are great. They're great end buyers. You can sell to a city worker, call it a day. They're not nitpicking every little thing. They're usually good people. If the market does turn, crap happens, you can rent a bungalow and at least tread water, right? And they can be okay with it. But the buyer pool for those are great. When we put something on the market for 400 or 500K, like it's always a bidding war. Like I love the mid game there. I think that's a great place to play. It's overly competitive.
What's the number? The mid game you're talking about?
What's up?
What's the number of properties for the mid game you're talking about?
So I would consider, again, a very, very big question. It's like relative. If you're on the north side here and you're, 2 years ago, we used to be able to buy a bungalow for about 200. And then we either pop the top on and go all the way out, or we can do like 150K rehab on that thing and sell it for like 5. So being 350, sell for 5 and call it a day. Like that was like, we did a lot of those. That's kind of a bread and butter of where we grew up. Now the problem is those are not 2 anymore, they're 280. right? Like and they're not really selling much more than 5 end users, and it's a lot more competitive there. And I would say, same thing on the south side, just take the numbers and make them smaller. But same concept, you go into, you can go into a Berwyn, you can go into, a lot of these places, they have the same bundles, you can do the same process.
Cool, thanks. It's funny, I actually bought a flip in Berwyn, so.
There you go.
And I got the top one, through there too bad. Well, guys, thank you so much. I know Jonathan normally starts with probably this question, I come in at the end, because we're starting to do, because there was so much I learned today. It's really interesting. There's a lot of us who are in the industry in some respect, but there's still so much to learn. So thank you both for bringing your expertise and your vulnerabilities as well. Much appreciated. We're here to grow. There's food, there's drinks. Major faux pas on my part, I didn't have any prosecco, so if you fancy rosé prosecco and orange juice, you've got yourself a mimosa. But yeah, thanks so much, guys, for taking time to be here today. Thank you to all of you and helping me get my steps in, asking the questions. And remember, we're last Saturday dinner. Finance and questions, ask me. Good questions, the guys here. Thank you very much, everyone, for a great Saturday morning. Thanks all.